The humidity of the night had not yet completely dissipated. A light layer of fog lay over the fields, as if someone had thrown a white sheet. The creaking of the wheels of the bullock carts and the chirping of birds gave the morning a strange simplicity and beauty. Somewhere in the distance, a child was loudly urging a donkey, and in the fields ahead, farmers had begun work in rows, holding hoes. In the midst of this scene, Ahmed's father was bending over, sowing seeds in the ground. The sun had not yet fully risen, but drops of sweat were reflecting on his forehead. His hands were rough, his clothes were dirty, but his face was calm. He had neither wealth nor luxuries, but there was a dignity in his labor that is rarely seen in the very rich. On the other hand, the scene in Ahmed's room was completely different. It was a small, rough room, with dirt on the walls in places. Books were crammed into an old wooden cupboard, some with torn covers, some with yellowed pages. In one corner, 2 degrees were hung framed: Bachelor of Engineering and LLB. The dust on these degrees screamed out the truth of Ahmed's life. His studies were complete, but his grades were still 0. Ahmed sat on the floor, his bag open, looking at his own degrees. The papers were in his hands, but questions were floating in his eyes. A faint smile came to his lips, and he muttered to himself, "Books taught me everything." But this era probably only understands the language of wealth. At that moment, his father's shadow fell at the door of the room. Standing by the door, Ahmed's father called out with a smile, "Son, are you counting degrees again? This paper is a testament to the hard work of your mind, but the real exam is yet to come." Ahmed looked at him in shock. "Father, I'm just wondering what all this studying was for. People in the city don't even let someone like me through the door. They say, where is the experience? Where is the recommendation? And above all, where is the money?" The father came in and sat down next to him. His hands were full of dirt, but when he placed them on his son's shoulder, Ahmed felt as if they were not hands, but a support. "Son, wealth does not make a person tall. The real height is in the heart. Those who have refused are prisoners of their own circumstances. So be patient. You will definitely get the fruits of your hard work, even if it takes a while." Ahmed said bitterly, "Father, people laugh that the son of a farmer, despite becoming an engineer, is still sitting in the field. My heart wants to answer everyone, but—" Father interrupted, but gently. "To answer, it takes time, not language. Remember, time answers everyone, that too in such a way that the other person is unable to speak." Ahmed lowered his eyes. A faint light was beginning to emerge within him, as if his father's words were secretly lighting a lamp in his heart. Ahmed sat silently for a while. His father got up and walked back to the fields, but his words echoed in the room as if they were engraved on the walls. While wrapping up his degrees, Ahmed's eyes suddenly fell on the old box. When he lifted the lid, there was an old dupatta on top. A faint fragrance still remained, the fragrance that had settled in his heart from his mother's presence years ago. Ahmed's hands trembled. He put the dupatta to his eyes and began to whisper, "Mother, I wish you were here today. I see your son is also an engineer, a lawyer. Would you believe me?" The corners of his eyes became moist. The curtains of memories began to open. A scene from his childhood came to mind. He was sick. He was feverish. His mother sat by his head all night and sang lullabies. She kept placing her soft hands on his forehead, and a prayer came out of his lips. "My son will become a great man. He will only live with honor and will honor people." Ahmed closed his eyes tightly. That moment was as if it had come alive. "Amma, I have not forgotten what you said. A woman's dignity flows in my blood. All this is the effect of your prayers." There was a mixture of sadness and love on her face. She carefully placed the dupatta back in the box, as if it were a sacred object. Then she stood up and took a deep breath. The morning mist was slowly lifting. The sun was peeking out from the edge of the fields, as if golden streaks of light were waking up the earth. Ahmed was standing in the courtyard, looking at his old bag. The bag was made of leather, but so old that it had scratches here and there. It contained everything from his life: books, a few papers, and the degrees that he was both proud of and sad about. His father came into the courtyard. He had a small cloth in his hand with 2 pairs of clean clothes tied in it. He handed the bag to Ahmed and said slowly, "Son, the rich have big buildings in the city, big cars, but despite everything, there is little humanity there. Remember, we have given you respect. We have given you faith. Don't sell it." Ahmed looked at his father's wrinkled face. There was a line of time drawn on the corners of his eyes, but faith was shining in those eyes. "Father, don't worry. I will do something and show you." Father laughed softly. "Yes, but in the right way. Remember, everyone hears the roar of success, but only Allah sees the patience of failure." Ahmed kissed his father's hands. There was a strange excitement in his heart. He knew that this journey would not be easy. But he also knew that behind him was a father's prayer, which was the greatest wealth in the world. A few moments later, he was walking through the narrow streets of the village towards the bus stand. The village children were shouting behind him, "Engineer Babu, come with a job. Our lawyer is going to the city." Ahmed walked with a slight smile. He kept thinking in his heart, whether the city gates open or not, I am not a loser. When the bus stopped at the city station, the noise and bustle startled Ahmed. The huge buildings, the rushing cars, the crowds on the sidewalks, and the walls covered in advertisements. All of this was a completely different world from the silence of his village. Ahmed put his bag on his shoulder and stepped forward. Everywhere there were people in sharp clothes, whose words were bursting with pride. At the door of the first factory, he went and applied for an interview. A manager came out, wearing a shiny watch and an expensive coat. Ahmed said humbly, "Sir, I am an engineer. I have a degree. If you want." The manager looked at him from top to bottom and replied with a laugh, "Many have degrees. Where is the recommendation?" Ahmed's lips tightened, but he said nothing. When he went to the next place, the question was, "Do you have 5 years of experience?" Ahmed said softly, "Experience comes only when you get the chance, sir." The person in front of him waved his hand. "Next!" Someone in the third place said clearly, "From your appearance, it seems that you come from the village. You will not be able to tolerate the atmosphere of our company." Ahmed sat down on the sidewalk tiredly. There was noise all around, but the voices of denial were ringing in his ears. A heavy weight settled in his heart. Is this a city or a fort? Every door is closed to the poor. He put the bag under his head and looked at the sky. The sun was about to sink behind the buildings. In the dim evening light, he muttered to himself, "I wish my mother were alive, to see how my son is struggling." Suddenly, an old face appeared in his mind. Catherine. That same Catherine. My classmate? I don't know where she would be today. A princess of a rich father, with every comfort in the world. What does she know about poverty? Ahmed took a cold breath. Perhaps wealth blinds a person, and poverty silences a person. The darkness of night was slowly descending on the city. The lights of the shops had turned on. The noise of traffic had begun to subside, but the noise of Ahmed's heart was increasing. He was sitting on the edge of the sidewalk, his bag under his head, his shoes covered in dust. The whole day's running had broken his body. He closed his eyes and whispered to himself, "How long will I have to wander like this? Maybe there is no place for the poor in this city." The same face came to mind again. Golden hair, sharp eyes, and a smile full of pride. Catherine, how rich she was, but not even a penny of distinction. Maybe wealth takes away humanity from a person. He laughed lightly at his own thought, but bitterness was hidden behind the laughter. And I, the son of a poor farmer, but I have never been poor in my thoughts. He was lost in these thoughts, when suddenly a sharp scream was heard on the street, the screeching of car tires, the screeching of brakes, and the noise of people. Ahmed sat up in shock. A large car in front of him lurched and stopped. Within moments, a crowd began to gather around him. Ahmed said to himself, "It seems like an accident is about to happen." He moved forward, and from here, the story was about to take a new turn. Ahmed was sitting on the sidewalk, lost in thought, when suddenly a loud scream rang in his ears. The car's tires made such a crunching sound as they scraped the road that the people around him were startled and immediately backed away. Large black car lurched on the road and then stopped with a jolt. The front tires skidded in the mud, and all the splatter fell on Ahmed's clothes. "Oh, he's dead!" a rickshaw driver shouted. "Do these rich people drive cars or planes?" a shopkeeper muttered. A crowd began to gather. Some people moved forward curiously, while others, with their hands on their hips, adopted the attitude of watching the spectacle. Ahmed stood up with a jolt. His shirt was covered in brown spots from the mud, but he didn't care. He walked straight towards the car. Instead of the driver, an elderly man was sitting inside the car. Sweat was on his face, panic in his eyes. Ahmed leaned over and knocked on the glass. "Uncle, is everything okay?" The door opened from the inside. When the door opened, Ahmed saw a dignified old man with white hair sitting inside. Sweat was pouring down his forehead, and his hands were trembling slightly. "Uncle, don't worry. You're absolutely fine." Ahmed quickly opened his bag, took out a bottle of water, and offered it to him with both hands. The old man looked at Ahmed for a few moments, as if this sudden extension of his hand was surprising to him. Then he slowly held the bottle and took 2 sips and took a deep breath. Ahmed held his shoulders and said, "There is noise on the road, but don't worry." The car just skidded a little. The old man's breathing was now recovering a little. The people standing around were whispering, "This boy is amazing. He is serving even after getting his clothes dirty. In this day and age, who stays with anyone, brother?" Ahmed took the bottle back from the old man's hand, closed the lid, and put it in his bag. He didn't even look at the mud-stained clothes for a moment. His eyes were only on the satisfaction of the elder. The elder said in a low voice, "Thank you, son. You helped me in time." Ahmed smiled and said, "Uncle, this was my duty. If a person is not useful to another person, then what is the use of him?" At that moment, the handle of the other door of the car moved. The handle of the other door of the car creaked open. After a moment of silence, a pair of high-heeled shoes stepped out. Then a glimpse of a light blue dress. A girl with braids of golden hair and sharp eyes. Catherine, as soon as she got off, the atmosphere changed. The people around her, who had been whispering in praise of Ahmed, now fell silent. All eyes were fixed on her. Catherine looked at the mud spread on the ground as soon as she stepped in, then straight at Ahmed. His clothes were stained, but Ahmed stood there unconcerned. Contempt flashed in Catherine's eyes. "Oh God," she said in a loud voice. "Who has been tampering with my car?" A slight rustling began in the crowd. Ahmed turned around to see the girl, walking straight towards him. Her golden hair flew in the wind and fell on her face, but her proud forehead did not bow in the slightest. She stopped in front of Ahmed, her eyes roaming from top to bottom over Ahmed's dirty clothes. Did you put these dirty hands on my car?" Ahmed opened his lips, But before he could answer, a sharp slap rang out on his cheek. A flash of lightning flashed across Ahmed's face. For a moment he was stunned. Someone in the crowd said in a low voice, "Hey, did you slap her?" Catherine's voice echoed, sharp and harsh. "Who are you to give my father this dirty water, and to put your filthy hands on my cart?" Her words pierced Ahmed's heart like an arrow. He stood there with his eyes fixed on the ground, as if holding on to his composure with both hands. People were watching the spectacle in silence. No one dared to say anything. Some looked at Ahmed with sympathy, but no one could speak in front of Catherine's glory. Ahmed slowly raised his eyes. The girl, whom he had loved in his heart since seeing her in college years ago, now he saw hatred for himself in her eyes. There was jealousy on his cheeks, but the jealousy in his heart was stronger. Catherine waved her hand and said, "Dad, do you have any idea? How far can these people fall?" The elderly man, sitting inside the car, suddenly leaned forward, his patience running out. A flash of lightning flashed across Ahmed's face. For a moment he was stunned. Someone in the crowd said in a low voice, "Hey, did you slap her?" Catherine's voice echoed, sharp and harsh. "Who are you to give my father this dirty water, and to put your filthy hands on my cart?" Her words pierced Ahmed's heart like an arrow. He stood there with his eyes fixed on the ground, as if holding on to his composure with both hands. People were watching the spectacle in silence. No one dared to say anything. Some looked at Ahmed with sympathy, but no one could speak in front of Catherine's glory. Ahmed slowly raised his eyes. The girl, whom he had loved in his heart since seeing her in college years ago, now he saw hatred for himself in her eyes. There was jealousy on his cheeks, but the jealousy in his heart was stronger. Catherine waved her hand and said, "Dad, do you have any idea? How far can these people fall?" The elderly man sitting inside the car suddenly leaned forward, his patience running out. The old man inside the car finally opened the door and walked out with heavy steps. He was still a little shocked, but his face was composed. "Catherine!" His voice was heavy and harsh. "What kind of rudeness is this?" Catherine turned around in shock. "Papa, you don't know this." "This?" Mr. Heckle raised his hand and stopped her. "Shut up. This boy was helping you. If he hadn't come in time, I might still be holding my breath in panic." Whispers in the crowd intensified. Some people nodded and murmured, "See, he's a big man, but he speaks justice." Ahmed stood silently. The mark of the slap on his cheek was still red, but there was a strange look in his eyes. Mr. Heikel came closer, put his hand on his shoulder, and said softly, "Son, I'm sorry. My daughter did wrong. On her behalf, I apologize to you." Ahmed quickly bowed his head. "Uncle, why are you apologizing? It's okay. She's my classmate. I know. She's not going to change." Mr. Heikel looked at Ahmed in shock, as if he had recognized his depth for the first time. He was silent for a few moments, then said slowly, "What's your name, son?" "What is your name, son?" Mr. Heikel asked again slowly. Ahmed stood up straight and replied, "Yes, Ahmed. Ahmed Farouk. I am the son of a farmer, but I have degrees in both engineering and law." A faint whisper arose in the crowd. Someone said in surprise, "2 degrees, and this is on the sidewalk." Mr. Heikel's eyes were deeply serious. "And where do you work now?" Ahmed said with a faint smile, "Just uncle. I am looking for work. So far, fate has not opened the door." Mr. Heikel was silent for a moment, then took out a heavy card from his coat pocket. He placed the card in Ahmed's hand. "This is my card. I need a qualified engineer to come to my car factory the day after tomorrow, and I think that is you." Ahmed looked at the card as if it were not a piece of paper, but a new door to life. A slight tremor ran through his heart. Was this dream going to come true? Mr. Haeckel sat back in the car. Catherine glared at Ahmed one last time with a mocking look, then stomped inside. The car door closed, the engine roared, and the black car moved forward. Ahmed stood there, card in hand, and said to himself, "Perhaps fate has just begun testing me." The sun had not yet fully risen. There was a slight chill in the air, but a strange warmth rose in Ahmed's heart. He was standing on the side of a large road, wearing his old but clean clothes, with a backpack on his shoulder. In front was a heavy iron gate, on which a shiny plate was hung. Haeckel Industries, main plant. Ahmed took a deep breath for a moment, and took out the heavy card that Mr. Haeckel had given him from his pocket. The nightlight was still shining on the card. This is the door that I had dreamed of for years," he said to himself. 2 security guards were standing outside the gate. As Ahmed approached, one of them raised his eyebrows and asked, "Where, sir?" "You can't just come in here." Ahmed politely handed over the card. "Yes, Mr. Haeckel has called me." "Take a look at this." The guard looked at the card, then glanced at Ahmed's plain clothes, and with a slight mocking smile, showed it to the other guard. "Wow, bro. Now Mr. Haeckel is also inviting people in with such clothes." Ahmed felt a twinge in his heart, but he silently lowered his eyes. The other guard kept looking at the card, then reported on the radio. A few moments later, a manager came out quickly from inside. He looked Ahmed up and down, then said in surprise, "Is it you? Ahmed, come on, Mr. Haeckel is waiting." Ahmed bowed his head slightly, and his steps entered the heavy gate. The inner courtyard of the factory was very spacious. The sounds of machines echoed all around. Workers were busy in their uniforms, and the doors of large halls were open where heavy parts were being cut. Ahmed's steps were walking slowly. Every eye seemed to stop at him. People were wondering who this new person in plain clothes had come. The manager brought him to a large glass office. The door opened, and Mr. Haeckel stood inside. He smiled as soon as he saw Ahmed and said, "Here you are, son. I was sure you would come." Ahmed greeted him politely. "Yes, uncle, you missed me. That's why I came." Mr. Haeckel stepped forward and held his hand, then looked at the other managers and said loudly, "This is Ahmed. He has both engineering and law degrees. He is a new addition to our team." The managers sitting in the room looked at each other. There was a slight surprise and some doubt on their faces. One whispered, "This is it, the farmer's son." The other shrugged and said, "It's Mr. Haeckel's decision. Let's see." Ahmed could feel their expressions, but his face was calm. Mr. Haeckel pointed at Ahmed and said, "From today, he will work with us. See, he will teach you all the meaning of hard work and sincerity." Ahmed thought to himself, "Now this is not just a job. This is my test." The next morning, the factory was as busy as ever. The hum of machines, the sound of metal parts clashing, and the voices of workers echoed. Ahmed was standing in the engineering section, inspecting the machinery, when a manager said sarcastically, "Let's see how capable this new guy is." He pointed to an old machine that was stalling repeatedly. "This problem has been going on for days. The big mechanics have given up. You have a chance. See." The workers started laughing at each other. "Now what a miracle this village boy will show," someone said softly. Ahmed brushed off the accumulated dust without saying anything and began to disassemble the machine parts one by one. His fingers were sharp but careful. He recognized the slight creaking of the parts even amidst the noise, and said in a low voice, "This belt is loose from its place, and this bolt is stuck here." He took a small wrench from his pocket, tightened the bolt, pulled the belt straight. Then he pressed the button. The machine started running at once, at first in a low voice, then at full speed. The noise in the hall increased, but this time of joy. "Wow, how is this?" One worker was surprised. "We thought this machine had become useless," said another. The manager's face was filled with surprise. He could not find anything to say. Ahmed said with a faint smile, "The problem was not big, but we have to wait and see." The workers clapped. Ahmed had won everyone's hearts on the very first morning. When lunchtime came, the workers sat on the carpet to one side and started opening their tiffins. Some rotis, vegetables, pickles, and just a dry double roti with half of it. Ahmed also opened his bag. He took out a simple lunchbox from inside, 2 rotis and dal. Instead of sitting close, he sat directly on the ground with the workers. A worker said in surprise, "Sir, the canteen inside is for you. This floor is for us." Ahmed smiled and said, "The food in the canteen inside may be good, but the taste is in sharing it with colleagues." The workers looked at each other in surprise. One of them held out a piece of his bread to Ahmed. "Sir, take this, from us." Ahmed took the piece without hesitation and handed half of his bread to him. In a few moments, laughter started to break out. The wall of alienation fell. "For the first time, sir, someone has considered us as their own." "Yes, brother, this is just like us." Ahmed felt a wave of peace in his heart. This was the kind of respect that comes not from a big chair, but from winning hearts. But this moment of peace was not allowed to last long. The click of high heels was heard at the office door. Everyone's laughter had not yet died down on the carpet, on the floor, when suddenly the click of high heels echoed through the door. Silence filled the air in a moment. Catherine came in. A light fragrance spread with her, golden hair falling gracefully on her shoulders, and the same old pride in her eyes. The workers stood up one by one. Some lowered their eyes, some folded their hands. Catherine's steps moved straight towards Ahmed, who was still sitting on the floor, holding a piece of bread. She looked Ahmed up and down, then laughed with her lips crookedly. "Oh, so these are the new engineers." Ahmed stood up silently. Catherine said in a loud voice, "Is the boy from the shop also going to become an engineer now? This factory is not a sidewalk where everyone who comes can sit and become the owner." Anxiety ran across the workers' faces. Some looked at Ahmed with sympathy, but no one said anything. Ahmed pursed his lips in self-control for a few moments, then replied bluntly, "Madam, engineering is measured by degrees, and I think I have them." A wave of whispers ran through the crowd. A flame lit up Catherine's eyes. "Degrees?" she said sharply. "Many have degrees. The real test is the work." Ahmed took a step forward, his eyes fixed on hers. "Okay then, just look at the work." Catherine's sharp words had heated up the atmosphere. The workers stood motionless in their places, and the manager watched from a distance. Ahmed was silent for a moment, then smiled softly. He approached the machine he had just repaired. While running his hand over the parts, he left a small nut slightly loose, not visible, but giving a slight jolt when the machine was running. He turned and looked directly at Catherine and said, "Madam, tomorrow you will see for yourself how this machine works. If you think I have failed, then your decision is correct." Catherine narrowed her eyes and listened to him. Then she said with a sarcastic smile, "Remember, Ahmed, mistakes are not tolerated in front of me." Ahmed replied without hesitation, "And pride does not win in front of me." The workers' faces were both surprised and curious. This was the first moment when the seed of stubbornness and ego was sown between Ahmed and Catherine. The next day, this seed was to blossom into a conflict that would change both of their lives for the next 2 years. The next morning, the machine was running loudly in the factory hall. The sounds of iron were echoing. The workers were busy with their work, when suddenly a machine gave a slight jolt. "Hey, what happened?" a worker said in panic. The machine was still running, but was making a slight tremor at intervals. At that moment, the sound of heels was heard at the door. Catherine came in, as if she had been waiting for this moment. She clasped her hands from a distance and said, "It's amazing. Despite all the noise and commotion, no one is even noticing this malfunction." She came straight to the machine and raised her finger at Ahmed. "Is this the new engineer? Is this your miracle? The factory hasn't been taken over for a single day, and the machine is struggling." The workers looked at Ahmed in shock. Some said in a low voice, "Yesterday, it was working perfectly." Catherine said in a loud voice, "What do you all get paid for? These people work hard, and this new guy is ruining their hard work." Ahmed stood silently, listening to everyone. He knew in his heart that he had left this floor. But with a restraint, he only said, "This is a temporary problem. I'll fix it now." Catherine let out a mocking laugh. "Now, yesterday, I said everything was fine. Today is the situation. Who knows what will happen tomorrow?" Silence fell on the crowd. For the first time, there was a smell of openly belittling Ahmed. And all this was because of Catherine's pride. Catherine's sarcastic words were still echoing in the air when Ahmed slowly approached the machine. Without saying anything, he picked up the tools, unscrewed the parts, and tightened the same loose nut. Then he pressed the button. The machine immediately started running at a straight speed, without any jerks. Satisfaction returned to the faces of the workers in the hall. Someone said, "See, it's fixed now." Someone else said softly, "Actually, it knows its job." Catherine's face went silent for a moment, but she immediately recovered and said loudly, "This is a temporary repair. Real ability is proven when the problem doesn't arise again." Ahmed said, in a straightforward tone while sweeping the dust, "Time decides about ability, not pride." The workers' eyes were now fixed on Ahmed. His words went straight to their hearts. Catherine narrowed her eyes and stared at Ahmed, as if for the first time she had seen a boldness in his tone that she was not accustomed to. The constant hum of the machine echoed in the hall, but the louder echo now was that of Anna, of Catherine and Ahmed. Mr. Heckel's office was bathed in dim light in the evening. The factory smoke could be seen rising from the large window. Catherine came in, sat down on a chair, and said sharply, "Papa, this boy is a threat to your factory. Fire him tomorrow." Mr. Heckel looked up from the file and said softly, "Son, it's too early to decide. He fixed a machine today." Catherine was furious. "Okay, this is a temporary repair. Paper. I saw it with my own eyes. It will embarrass us." At that moment the door opened. Ahmed came in. His clothes were covered in machine grease, but his face was calm. He greeted Mr. Heckel directly, then looked at Catherine. "Madam, if you doubt my work, challenge me directly. I am right here." Catherine leaned back in her chair and said, "Challenge. You can't even imagine. I won't let you work in the factory for a day in peace." Ahmed replied calmly, "And I can endure 2 years if necessary." Mr. Heckel watched them both. A faint smile appeared on his lips, but he said nothing. The room was silent, but behind this silence, a storm was brewing. It was morning. Workers were filing in at the factory gate. The hum of machines was already echoing inside. Ahmed came in, greeting everyone as usual. He was just looking at the planning papers in a corner of the workshop when suddenly Catherine called out loudly, "Everyone come over here." The workers gathered around, looking at each other. Catherine had a file in her hand, which she slammed down on the table. "Look at this. Who made this mistake in the design?" Everyone's eyes were fixed on Ahmed. He calmly got up from his seat and opened the file. Catherine said sharply, "This is the new engineer that my father trusts so much. According to the file, if this design had been used, we would have lost millions." Whispers began to circulate among the workers. Ahmed read the file silently for a few moments, then said softly, "Madam, if you read to the end, you would see that this is an old draft of the design. This is the original draft." He took out a clean piece of paper from his pocket and placed it in front of everyone. The correct measurements and changes were clearly written on it. Silence fell in the hall. A worker said with suppressed lips, "So it wasn't Ahmed's mistake." Catherine's face turned red for a moment. She controlled herself and said, "Maybe it turned out to be correct by chance. But remember, Ahmed, I always have my eye on you." Ahmed replied calmly, "Madam, what you see is a different matter. But the truth always comes out." There was a slight sparkle in the workers' eyes. For the first time, they were seeing someone stand firm in the face of Catherine's arrogance. Mr. Heckle was standing at the door, watching all this. A deep thought came over his face, as if he were weighing Ahmed's courage in his heart. This moment was not just an incident, but the first glimpse of a long game. Now every day, every decision, every discussion was about to turn into a struggle that would last for 2 whole years between Ahmed and Catherine. It was noon. The sun was shining in the factory yard, but the workers were sitting on the carpet, their tiffins open. Today, Ahmed also sat among them. As usual, a worker said hesitantly, "Sir, why do you need to sit here on the ground? There are chairs for you inside the office." Ahmed smiled and said, "Chairs don't make a person taller. The heart does. And my heart is here, with you people." Everyone's eyes met. Then the atmosphere smiled slightly. A worker held out a piece of pickle from his tiffin to Ahmed. "Take this, sir." From us today, Ahmed took the pickle without hesitation, placed half of his bread in the worker's hand. This small exchange became a big place in the hearts of the workers. Someone said softly, "This is not like the others." Another said, "Yes, this is just like us." Meanwhile, Catherine was watching the scene from afar through the office window. There was a strange anxiety in her eyes. She couldn't understand why these people were getting so close to this poor boy. For the first time, the workers openly joked around Ahmed, as if he were one of them. It was at this moment that the atmosphere in the factory began to change, and this change was going to sting Catherine's pride even more. It was evening. The noise of the factory was slowly fading. The workers were packing up their tools. Some were leaving, wiping sweat from their clothes. Mr. Heikel was standing by his large window, watching the scene. In front of him was the same courtyard where Ahmed had been sitting and eating with the workers, where he had shared their sorrows, shared their laughter, and stood at the forefront of the work. A slight softness came into his eyes, but at the same time, deep thought. He said softly to himself, "This boy is not ordinary." Then his eyes fell on the records on the table. The reports for the past few months were open. The factory's performance was improving, defects had decreased, and the workers' attendance had increased. All this was the result of Ahmed's supervision and attitude. Mr. Heikel took a deep breath as he sat on the chair. There must have been a conflict in his mind. His daughter's stubbornness and Ahmed's truthfulness. He knew that Catherine's ego clashed with Ahmed's every day, but he also saw that Ahmed always won through discipline, hard work, and morals. He began to think to himself, time itself will decide who the real winner is. The evening sun was setting beyond the window, as if announcing the beginning of a long journey. The soft afternoon sun spread across the courtyard. The workers were sitting on the carpet, and Ahmed was also sitting among them. Sometimes someone would laugh. Sometimes someone would tell stories about his village, and Ahmed would join in with every sentence, as if he had been a companion for years. A worker said with a laugh, "Sir, you're just a pen and paper person, yet you understand our hardship." Ahmed replied while breaking a piece of bread, "Hardship is not only for the body. Sometimes the heart also carries a heavy burden, and that burden is the heaviest of all." The workers fell silent. A glimmer of hope began to shine in their eyes. Catherine was watching all this from the office window. She had a file in her hand, but her eyes were fixed on Ahmed. A strange tension arose in her heart. "Why are they all giving him so much respect?" she said to herself. "He is just an ordinary boy, the son of a farmer." But the scene was before her. Ahmed's prestige among the workers was growing, and this fact was pricking Catherine like a thorn. It was afternoon. The machines inside the factory were running at full speed. Suddenly, a worker shouted, "Aha! Hand! My hand is stuck!" All the workers standing near the machine panicked. Some ran towards the power switch. Some backed away. Catherine also ran after hearing the noise. At that moment, Ahmed took a quick step. He reached the machine first. "Switch off!" he shouted with all his might. As soon as the power went out, he turned the machine part upside down with his hands, pulled the worker's hand out, and took a clean cloth from his pocket and wrapped it around the wound. Tears filled the worker's eyes. "Sir, you saved my life." Catherine was standing a few steps away, watching everything. A strange tremor ran through her heart. There were bloodstains on Ahmed's clothes, but there was a calmness on his face, as if it was his duty to do all this. The workers began to pray for him. Someone said, "If it hadn't been for this, I don't know what would have happened." Catherine's lips parted slightly, but she couldn't say anything. Only a soft light flickered in her eyes for the first time. But the next moment, she straightened her back and put on a cloak of pride, as if nothing had happened. But the next moment, he straightened his back and put on a cloak of pride, as if nothing had happened. There was still commotion in the room. The injured worker was being carried to the medical room by other workers. Ahmed's hands were bloody. He quickly took water from the bucket, kept nearby, and washed them. The water turned red and started flowing. Catherine's eyes could not hide the scene, even if she tried. She turned and walked towards her office, but her steps became heavy. Her face showed hardness, but a soft gratitude was emerging in her heart. If it hadn't been for this, there might have been a loss of life today. She reached her cabin and sat down on the chair. She tried to open the file in front of her, but the letters began to blur. She kept remembering Ahmed's tone, his voice when he had ordered, "Switch off," the same confidence, the same fearlessness, as if standing up for others without caring about her own life. Catherine bit her lip, as if rebuking herself. It's just pretending, nothing more. But her heart knew it wasn't pretending. But my heart knew this was not a drama. At the same time, Catherine heard laughter from outside. She came closer to the window. In the courtyard, the workers had finished their work and were having tea. Ahmed was sitting in the middle. A worker asked, "Sir, you seem to be from a big house. Then how is all this?" Ahmed said with a slight smile, "A big house is sometimes a matter of luck, not of hard work. My house was small, but my dreams were very big." The workers came closer out of curiosity. Ahmed said in a low voice, "My mother left this world early. I learned in my childhood that I have to survive even without a mother. My father was a farmer. He would bend over the ground day and night. The blisters on his hands were a textbook for me. The teacups were placed gently in silence." Ahmed looked down at the ground. "I was good at studying. I also got an engineering degree. a law license. But doors only open to those who have power and money. I only had knowledge and determination. The worker's eyes began to water. One said slowly, "Sir, you are just like us." Catherine's heart started to beat. Standing behind the window, she was absorbing every word Ahmed said. This was the first time that the image of Ahmed in her heart was changing. This was the first time that the image of Ahmed was changing in his heart. Slight silence fell in the courtyard. The workers were sitting under the burden of Ahmed's words. Someone asked in a shocked voice, "Sir, then why are you here, in this factory?" Ahmed took a deep breath. He thought for a few moments, then said with a light laugh, "Because fate opened this door in front of me, and maybe everything I have been looking for years is hidden behind it." The workers looked at each other. Someone asked again, "What is that, sir?" Ahmed's gaze fell to the ground. His lips trembled slightly. Then he said slowly, "There is a girl from my college days, whom I have been carrying in my heart for 12 years. The workers laughed in surprise. But Ahmed's face did not smile. There was a heaviness in his voice. "That girl is from a very high world. I never dared to tell her. I just kept it in my heart." Catherine's breath caught. Behind the window, her fingers gripped the frame more tightly. She felt as if the ground had slipped from under her. Ahmed said in a slow but clear voice, "Her name is Catherine." The teacup slipped from the hand of a worker and fell to the ground, the sound echoing. Catherine stepped back, her heart beating faster. There was a storm in her eyes, surprise, anger, and an inexplicable tremor. There was a storm in her eyes, surprise, anger, and an inexplicable tremor. Catherine quickly moved away from the window. The files clattered loudly on the table and fell onto the chair. Ahmed's voice echoed in her ears. "Her name is Catherine." She put both hands over her ears, as if to muffle the noise, but the words kept piercing her heart like shards of glass. The silence in the room became unbearable. She pulled the curtains of the window, as if hiding the scene would also clear her heart. But as soon as she closed her eyes, the same scene emerged. Ahmed's bent face, the tone that didn't seem playful, the truth that was tearing at her pride. Catherine gritted her teeth. "No, that's impossible." But her heart raised a question for the first time. If this is a lie, why was there so much pain in his eyes? She tried to hold her breath, but her heartbeat was getting faster and faster. It was as if Ahmed's words had settled inside her, instead of echoing somewhere, as if Ahmed's words were settling in her instead of echoing somewhere inside her. Catherine suddenly picked up the file on the table and slammed it shut. The sound of papers echoed in the room. Her lips were pursed tightly, the same stubborn fire burning in her eyes. "How dare he?" she muttered softly. "Talk about me like that in front of everyone." Her steps quickened. She left the office, walked down the long hall, and reached the courtyard below. The workers had scattered now. Only Ahmed was wrapping up a few papers. Catherine's steps stopped, but her eyes were fixed on him. She wanted to go there and scream, ask, accuse, but there was a lump in her throat. Ahmed looked up. Their eyes met for a moment. Catherine's lips opened, but no words could come out. She turned and quickly walked back. On the way, she said angrily to herself, "No, I will never convince him that his words touched me." But a storm of ego and anxiety was raging inside her heart, which the more she tried to suppress, the more it was surging. But a storm of ego and anxiety was raging inside her heart, which the more she tried to suppress, the more it was surging. That evening, the workers were sitting around tea in the courtyard again. Ahmed also agreed to sit there to spend time with them. A series of jokes followed over a cup of tea. One worker narrowed his eyes and said, "Sir, we just heard your secret today." Ahmed was shocked. "What secret?" The other worker laughed. "The one whose name you mentioned in front of everyone." Ahmed tried to suppress a smile, but his face remained serious. "You people have a habit of talking too much." The workers started laughing. One said, "Sir, have you kept it hidden in your heart for so many years? Is this something that happened?" Ahmed peered into the cup. The steam of tea was flying before his eyes, like an image hidden behind a fog. He spoke softly. "There are some dreams that are broken by being spoken of." His voice became heavy as he said this. For a moment, amidst the laughter, everyone was silent. Catherine was listening to all this from her cabin above. Another knot formed in her heart. Why does this man keep talking about me? Why does this man keep on nagging me? Catherine jerked the window curtain aside and stepped into the courtyard below. The workers were still sitting, but Ahmed stood up and began to pack up the files. She approached him with quick steps. "Mr. Ahmed." There was an unusual hardness in his voice. Ahmed stopped and straightened up to look at her. "Yes, Miss Catherine. Why wasn't this design report in the office yesterday morning?" he said, waving a paper, although the same report was already on his desk. Ahmed replied in a calm tone, "Madam, that report was given to your secretary yesterday. Perhaps you haven't checked it yet." Catherine's face hesitated for a moment, but then her tone hardened. "You always speak in your own defense. Never admit a mistake." Ahmed sighed lightly and said, "If I am really wrong, I will be the first to admit it, but when the truth is different, it is better to remain silent." With that, he turned around, taking the file in his hand. Catherine stood there, a new wave of anger and anxiety running through her heart. She felt as if there was a hidden sarcasm in every answer from Ahmed that cut straight to her. Pride. She felt as if there was a hidden sarcasm in every one of Ahmed's answers that cut straight to her. Pride. Catherine was walking briskly back to her office when suddenly she found Mr. Heckle standing in front of her at the corner of the hall. They had already seen the whole scene. Catherine's reprimands, Ahmed's calmness, and the invisible tension that was rising between them. "Son," Mr. Heckle said softly. "Why that tone?" Catherine was startled, then immediately raised her head. "I was just doing my duty, Papa." Mr. Heckle looked at her deeply. There was both tenderness and question in his eyes. "Duties are never done disrespectfully. Remember, everyone listens to everything you say. The workers, Ahmed too, and me too." Catherine looked away. Her lips pursed and she moved on without answering. Mr. Heckle stood there for a while. A thought began to arise in his heart. What is this stubbornness about? Ahmed's silence or his own ego? He took a deep breath and looked down at the courtyard, where Ahmed stood among the workers, his papers in hand, straight, strong, but silent. Mr. Heckle was lost in thought, and in the courtyard, Ahmed was still wrapping up his papers. The next day, the atmosphere inside the factory was different. A strange hoarseness had mingled with the noise of the machines. Ahmed went near the auto line and listened. The grinding of the gears was the same sound he had recognized in the engineering lab years ago. The first sign of a major malfunction, he immediately went to the control room. Why are these main valve sensors repeatedly giving red signals? He asked an operator. The man shrugged. "Sir, these sensors have been making noise since last week, but the report was said to be ready tomorrow." Ahmed's forehead furrowed. Tomorrow. If this cylinder overheats, the entire section could be in danger. He walked quickly back to the line. The workers were busy with their routine. No one noticed anything unusual, but there was an unknown weight in Ahmed's heart. He called out to a worker, "Just warn everyone, slow down the work on the line today. But before he could finish speaking, a loud sound of metal breaking came from somewhere inside. Ahmed's heart sank. From somewhere inside, there was a loud sound of metal breaking. The next moment, a cylinder valve released a burst of steam and then turned into roaring flames. The fire engulfed the nearby cables in an instant. "Fire! Fire!" A worker shouted and ran away. There was noise all around. The burning atmosphere of the iron furnaces now seemed even more terrifying with the flames. The workers started running in a frenzy. Some tried to sound the alarm, but could not press any button in the confusion. Ahmed jumped up and pulled the lever of the nearest alarm first. The scream of the siren shook the entire plant. "Everyone back! Clear the line!" Ahmed shouted, but his voice was drowned out by the noise. Some of the workers' clothes even caught fire. They started to fall to the ground screaming. Ahmed ran and sprayed them with an old fire extinguisher and put them out. In the chaos, cars came and stopped outside. Mr. Temple and Catherine came running in. Flames were flying before them. Smoke was hitting the ceiling and filling the hall. Catherine's heart began to beat faster. It was the first time she had seen her empire burn like this, with her own eyes. Catherine's heart began to beat faster. It was the first time she had seen her empire burn like this, with her own eyes. Ahmed signaled as soon as he saw them. "Stay back! There's danger here!" Then he sprinted back towards the machines. The flames had now reached the copper wiring. If the fire had caught the main control panel, the entire plant could have exploded. Ahmed snatched the key from a worker and opened the valve of the fire hose. The strong stream of water hit the flames, and smoke rose. But instead of extinguishing the fire, it spread even further. "High pressure! Full pressure!" Ahmed shouted. 2 workers joined him. Their hands were shaking, but Ahmed's voice was so confident that instead of stopping, everyone started to help. One worker's shirt caught fire again. Ahmed dropped the hose and jumped on it himself, took off his jacket, wrapped it around him, and put out the fire. His arms burned, but he didn't care. Catherine saw it all with her own eyes. She wanted to move forward herself, but Mr. Heckle held her hand. "This is his test, and maybe ours too," he muttered. Ahmed gasps and takes up the hose again, sweat and smoke streaming down his face. But there is only one determination in his eyes. This fire must be put out, somehow. Ahmed gasps and grabs the hose again, sweat and smoke streaming down his face. But there is only one determination in his eyes, to put out this fire, no matter what. Catherine's feet seemed to sink into the ground. Before her eyes stood the same man she had always despised. Now he was risking his life to save everyone. Is this Ahmed?" She repeated the question through smoke-soaked lips. The flames were screaming. The workers were shouting, but Ahmed's voice was louder than all. "Have courage! Clear the line! Don't leave anyone behind!" His face looked burned. Ash had settled on his clothes, but there was a strange light in his eyes. Catherine saw this light for the first time. It was not pride. It was humanity. Mr. Heichel said softly, "See, son, real dignity is not in wealth, in service." Catherine's heart began to beat faster. She wanted to say something, but the words stuck in her throat. In front of her, Ahmed jumped into the fire again. At that moment, Catherine felt as if all the walls of her pride were collapsing on their own. In front of him, Ahmed jumped into the fire again. At that moment, Catherine felt as if all the walls of her pride were collapsing on their own. After 4 hours of struggle, the flames finally began to fade. The fire brigade, vehicles also arrived, and the remaining fire was brought under control. The entire hall was filled with smoke and the smell of burning metal. The workers were sitting on the ground, exhausted. Their eyes were fixed on Ahmed, the man who had gone into the fire and pulled them out. If it weren't for Ahmed, a worker gasped. We wouldn't have survived. Someone shouted, Our hero is Ahmed. As the voice rang out, the other workers also began to repeat, Hero Ahmed. Hero Ahmed. Ahmed's face was covered in sweat and ash. He just stood there silently, his eyes downcast, as if all these praises meant nothing to him. Catherine gently clenched her fists upon seeing this scene. For the first time, she realized that true respect is earned from the heart, not just from name and wealth. Mr. Haeckel stepped forward and placed his hand on Ahmed's shoulder. Son, you have not only saved the factory today, but also saved the honor of all of us. Ahmed said only this. It was my duty. Uncle. There was complete silence in the hall for a moment, but behind this silence, a new story was being born. In Catherine's heart, the factory air was still filled with smoke and the smell of burning. There were black marks on the walls, ashes scattered on the floor, and in some places smoke was still rising from broken equipment. The workers were sitting on the ground, exhausted and scared. Some had torn clothes. Some had blackened faces. But all their eyes were fixed on the same side. Ahmed was sitting in the corner. His hands were badly burned. He was silently taking a bottle from his bag and pouring water on them. There was pain on his face, but not a word of complaint on his tongue. Whispers began among the workers. If it hadn't been for this, we would all have been finished today. This Ahmed is a hero. A hero. He risked his life, saving us and the factory. Mr. Haeckel came and said affectionately to the workers, Everyone go home. Today is the end. You are all tired. The workers kept looking at Ahmed as they left. Some left with their hands on his shoulders, some with prayers, some with just a look of gratitude in their eyes. Everyone had the same name on their lips, Hero Ahmed. Catherine stood at a short distance and watched all this. A strange storm was brewing inside her. The person she had considered just a poor employee until yesterday, today he had become a hero on everyone's lips. Ahmed's simple smile and patience were cutting through her pride. Catherine looked at Ahmed's hands. Wounded, burned, but still, he was calmly tending to his wounds, as if nothing had happened. A strange pain woke up in Catherine's heart for a moment. She blinked and tried to control herself. Night had fallen. The factory was almost empty. All the workers had left. Only Ahmed was packing up papers and tools. His hands were still injured, but instead of asking for anyone's help, he was doing everything himself. Suddenly, a light step was heard. Ahmed turned around. Catherine was standing at the door. She had a small bottle of ointment in her hand. For a few moments both were silent. Only the ticking of the large factory clock echoed. Catherine slowly moved forward. For the first time there was softness in her voice. This ointment is better. The doctor sent it especially for me. It will be good for your wounds. Ahmed was surprised. This was the same Catherine who had spoken to him in a harsh tone until yesterday. For the first time, there was softness in her eyes instead of harshness. Ahmed looked at her for a moment before taking the ointment. Then he said, slowly, Thank you. Catherine's lips moved, but the words could not come out. She stood there for a moment, as if she wanted to say a lot in her heart, but her pride and ego were blocking the way. Then she turned quickly, but her steps were heavy, as if she was forcing herself away. Ahmed watched her go silently. A faint smile appeared in her heart, but at the same time, an old sadness emerged in her eyes. That night, Catherine could not sleep. She stood in front of the mirror in her room. There was confusion on her face, moisture in her eyes. Why am I doing this? She asked herself. This is the same Ahmed that I always despised. And today I am worried about his wounds. She remembered when the workers were calling her Hero Ahmed. And Ahmed stood silently in the middle of everyone. This silence broke the wall of her pride. There was a strange burden in her heart, as if he was asking for an account for years of mistakes. Catherine's eyes showed tenderness for Ahmed for the first time, but her tongue was still silent. The next morning, Mr. Heikel and Catherine sat face to face at the breakfast table. There were plates of food on the table, but the atmosphere was silent. Mr. Heikel suddenly said, "Catherine, I know something is changing in your heart." Catherine was shocked. "Papa, what do you want to say?" Mr. Heikel said in a serious tone, "Son, what Ahmed did yesterday was not the mark of a rich or poor person. It was humanity." Catherine lowered her eyes. Her heart beat faster. Remember, the true identity of a person is not determined by the wealth or power he possesses. The true identity is sacrificing for others, giving respect, sharing love. Ahmed showed you how respect is earned. Catherine's lips trembled. Moisture appeared in her eyes. "Papa, I always misunderstood him." Mr. Heikel gently placed his hand on her hand. "There is still time, son. Recognize the truth. Pride makes a person small. Only by enlarging the heart can a person become great." Catherine remained silent, but a new battle began in her heart. Pride and gentleness stood face to face. From that day on, something had changed in Catherine's eyes for Ahmed. She still remained silent, but a new seed had been planted in her heart. This seed was still hidden under the ground, but would soon grow towards the light. The soft morning light was streaming in through the window. The factory was being repaired. Workers were painting machines, replacing broken glass. Life was returning to the environment, but Ahmed's heart was elsewhere. He was writing something in his diary, as if a burden that had been suppressed in his heart for years was coming out in the form of words. Two workers sitting in the corner of the room were talking slowly. "Ahmed is so straightforward. Do you know how hard it was for him to complete his studies?" "Yes, brother. I heard that he is the son of a farmer. He comes from a poor family, but has a big heart." When Ahmed heard this, a slight smile came to his lips, but the next moment his face became serious. At the same time, some friends came up to him jokingly. "Ahmed, brother, tell me the truth. Have you ever been in love?" They surrounded him laughing. Ahmed hesitated at first, then said softly, "For 12 years there is a secret in my heart, which I have never told anyone." Everyone was shocked. Who is in love?" A slight moisture appeared in Ahmed's eyes. "My classmate was Catherine." Silence fell in the room. Ahmed's friends started looking at each other. Ahmed took a deep breath. "I always wanted her in my heart, but I never had the courage to say it. She was rich, I was poor. She had a quick temper, and I, just the son of a farmer. I thought she would never accept me." These words came from the depths of Ahmed's heart, but Ahmed was unaware that outside the room, in the doorway, Catherine was listening to everything. Her footsteps seemed to be rooted to the ground. Her heart started beating loudly. This has wanted me for 12 years." He put his hands over his ears, as if he couldn't believe it. Moisture flooded his eyes. Ahmed's friends joked. "That's great, Ahmed. 12 years, and you never said it." Ahmed said slowly, seeing his smile. It seemed like the world was found, but his pride and bad temper always stopped me. I was afraid that I would lose my dignity. These words pierced Catherine's heart like arrows. She turned and quickly walked towards her room. When she entered, her tears came out. "Oh God, I always looked down on him, crushed his feelings, and this man has wanted me for years." She looked at herself in the mirror, her face hard with pride, but her eyes were defeated. It was evening. Suddenly, News spread that the board meeting had decided to expel Ahmed from the factory. Some big capitalists said, "We shouldn't rely so much on the poor employee. This is a risk. The factory has a name, a brand." Ahmed was called into the meeting hall. She entered silently. Cold eyes in the room were welcoming her. A member said sternly, "There is no doubt about your ability. But this factory is a big empire. We cannot give so much power to a farmer's son." Ahmed bowed his head and replied, "If my being here is a burden, I will leave myself. I have considered the factory to be my home, but perhaps you all do not like my presence." Mr. Heikel wanted to say something, but was helpless before the board's decision. Ahmed silently picked up his bag and left. He did not know that Catherine was listening to all this. She was standing in the corner of the room. Her heart was crying, but her lips were sealed. When Ahmed walked out the door, her steps trembled. She was thinking to herself, "This person who hid my name in his heart for 12 years. Today I lost him." Late at night, Catherine was sitting in her room, remembering everything Ahmed had said. "Seeing my smile. It seemed like the world had been found." This sentence had been engraved on her heart. She decided she would no longer remain silent. She would accept the truth of her heart. This was the day when Catherine's pride was completely broken for the first time, and the truth hidden in her heart emerged as light. Ahmed's steps were heavy. He was walking out of the factory gate. The workers saw him go, their eyes filled with sadness. Someone said softly, "A hero will have to go like this. It's not fair." Ahmed just smiled at them all and said, "Remember him in your prayers. Leave the rest to God." There was both sadness and peace in his words. Ahmed got into a taxi and headed towards the village. The car left the bright streets of the city and reached the dirt roads. The smell of the fields, the chirping of birds, and the cool air calmed his heart for a moment. But the emptiness inside was growing. When he reached home, the creaking of the old door welcomed him. His father was sitting on a cot outside. They stood up when they saw Ahmed. "Son, you've come? Is everything okay?" Ahmed placed his hand on his shoulder and said softly, "Yes, father, it's okay. It's just that the city hasn't accepted it." The father smiled and said, "Son, the world often stumbles over the poor, but it can never reject hard work and truth. Your time will come too." Ahmed's heart felt a little lighter. Meanwhile, in the city, in the large hall of the factory, Catherine was sitting alone. The workers had all left. Only the silent machines were standing. There was moisture in her eyes. She was repeatedly remembering Ahmed's words. "I considered the factory my home. For 12 years, there has been a secret in my heart." Catherine hit the table. "What have I done? I lost it." There was a strange emptiness inside her. For the first time, her wealth, her status, and her pride all seemed useless. All night long, she kept recalling Ahmed's diary, remembering the sentences that Ahmed had told his friends. Sleep was missing from her eyes. The next morning, Mr. Heikel called her. "Son, your face looks very pale. What's the matter?" Catherine said after a while of silence. "Papa, I lost Ahmed. He wanted me for years, and I always broke his heart. And now he's gone." Mr. Heikel said slowly, "If he's so precious to you, daughter, go. Bring him back." A sparkle appeared in Catherine's eyes, but it faded the next moment. "Papa, what if he doesn't forgive me? What if he remembers my bitterness?" Mr. Heikel replied, "Love teaches forgiveness. If he has love in his heart, he will definitely accept you." Catherine decided. She would go to the village. 2 days later, she reached the village with her father's driver. The car stopped in front of Ahmed's house on a dirt road. Outside the dirt house, there was a tree under which Ahmed's father was sitting on a cot, sunbathing. Catherine greeted him so humbly for the first time. "Assalamu alaikum, uncle." He was startled. then said cheerfully, "Walaikum assalamu, daughter. Who are you?" Catherine said slowly, "I am Catherine, Ahmed's friend." A smile appeared in Ahmed's father's eyes. "Well, you are the one whom Ahmed often thought about." Catherine's heart beat fast. She went inside. Ahmed was sitting in the room, wrapping up old books. When she saw Catherine standing at the door, she was startled. "You here?" Ahmed's tone was surprised. Catherine lowered her eyes. "Ahmed, I need to talk to you." Silence fell in the room. Only the sound of birds could be heard outside. Catherine's eyes were moist. "Med, I always misunderstood you, hurt you, let you down, and you kept me in your heart for years. I don't know if I'm even worthy of forgiveness." Ahmed looked at her carefully. His heart beat faster. But all that came to his lips was, "Why did it take you so many years to say all this, Catherine?" Catherine said softly, "Because there was a wall of pride around my heart, and you broke that wall with your sacrifice." Ahmed remained silent. There was a strange ocean in his eyes. At that moment, there was a strange distance between the two, and also closeness, as if their hearts were beating for each other, but the wounds had yet to heal. This was their first true conversation, where pride broke, and their hearts found a way for the first time. The room was silent. A faint ray of sunlight was streaming in through the window, and Ahmed's eyes were still fixed on Catherine. The moment was heavy. On one side, the wounds of years. On the other, the whisper of new passion. Catherine moved forward slowly. "Ahmed, I know that you have many grievances against me in your heart, and there should be. But if you give me a chance, maybe I can prove that I have changed." Ahmed leaned back in his chair. The light fell on his injured hand. "Catherine, heart wounds never heal easily. Your words have always made me feel small. Now if you are saying that you have changed, then I need time to believe it." Catherine's lips trembled. "I am willing to give time." Ahmed lowered his eyes. His heart was fluttering. He had been longing for this moment for years. But when it came today, he couldn't believe it. Meanwhile, a new news spread in the village. The owners of the nearby factory had made a big plan to damage Mr. Heikel's business. They were trying to stop their supply by creating a technical malfunction in their plant. When this news reached Ahmed, he was shocked. He went straight to Mr. Heikel. "Uncle, you have to take a big step immediately. The enemy is playing games against you. If this supply stops, your empire will shake," Mr. Heikel said worriedly. "But Ahmed, son, you are no longer with us. We have fired you," Ahmed said in a strong tone. "I am not asking for a job. This is my duty. You have always respected me. If I turn a blind eye, it will be against humanity." Mr. Heikel's eyes moistened. "You are truly a great man, Ahmed." The next day, Ahmed made a plan to protect the plant with his engineering skills. Standing with the workers, he checked the machines, thwarting the enemy's trick. The workers once again chanted slogans for Ahmed. "Long live Ahmed Bhai." Catherine was watching all this. A new sense of pride rose in her heart, but at the same time fear. If he stands in front of the enemy, his life may be in danger. At night, Catherine stopped Ahmed and said, "Ahmed, you don't need to risk your life. This is all Papa's responsibility." Ahmed smiled and said, "Catherine, love is not just about words. Love is sharing the suffering of others, sacrificing for them. This factory does not only belong to your Papa, it also belongs to the hundreds of workers whose homes are lit by it. I have come to bear the burden of all of them." Catherine's lips fell silent. Tears filled her eyes. Is this the test of love? That the man who has wanted me for years is now risking his life for me? The next day, another trick of the enemy was revealed. A major fault suddenly occurred in one part of the plant. Everyone panicked. The workers started shouting, "It's going to explode! Everyone back off. Ahmed moved forward. His hands were injured, but he did not give up. He went inside the machine and started fixing the wires. He was sweating in the midst of smoke and sparks. Catherine was standing outside, crying, "Ahmed, come out. You will die." Ahmed shouted from inside, "If my sacrifice saves all this, then even death is acceptable." A few moments later, there was a sudden explosion. Everyone's heart stopped. But when the smoke cleared, Ahmed was standing. His clothes were burned. His hands were even more injured. But the machine had stopped. The plant was safe. The workers started shouting happily, "Ahmed is saved. The plant is saved." Catherine ran forward and held Ahmed's hands for the first time in front of everyone. "You're crazy, Ahmed. Why did you risk your life?" Ahmed said with a tired smile, "This was my test, Catherine, and maybe this was the test of your love too." Tears flowed from Catherine's eyes. At that moment, she accepted Ahmed as hers. With all the brokenness of her heart, this was the day when both Ahmed and Catherine felt each other's love openly for the first time. But the obstacles of the world still remained, and the real struggle was about to begin. Evening was falling. A crowd of workers stood in the factory yard. All eyes were on Ahmed, who was still sitting on a chair with injured hands and a tired body. His breathing was heavy, but his face was radiant with determination. Mr. Haikal slowly walked forward. Tears of pride and love were flowing in his eyes. "Ahmed's son, you have done what even the most skilled engineers could not do. Today you have saved not only my factory, but also my dream." In front of everyone, he bowed and held Ahmed's hand. "Now you are not just a worker or an engineer. You are my son." Hearing this, the crowd erupted in applause and chants. "Long live Ahmed, brother! Long live Ahmed, brother!" Catherine's eyes filled with tears. She held Ahmed's other hand with trembling hands. "Papa is right. You are not just an engineer. You are my everything." Ahmed looked at him in shock. The longing that had been buried in his heart for years had become a reality today. But Ahmed's voice was heavy and trembling. "Catherine, are you saying this in front of everyone?" Catherine ignored anyone in the crowd. "Yes, Ahmed, in front of everyone. Without you, my existence is incomplete. And if you don't accept me, this life is a burden for me." Her tears began to fall on Ahmed's hand. Ahmed's heart's wounds were soaked, and the longing of years silently came into his eyes. Ahmed said softly, "Catherine, I have always wanted you, but I was afraid that the shadows of your pride would cover our love. If you leave everything and stand by me today, then I accept you like my own breath." With this sentence, a new color filled the air. The workers chanted slogans. Some wiped their tears in joy. Mr. Haikal took both Ahmed and Catherine in his arms. From today, this factory is not just for the Haikal group. It is a sign of Ahmed and Catherine's love. The next day, news spread throughout the city that the successor to the Haikal group had been announced. Surprisingly, the successor was the boy who once sat on the sidewalk and shed tears while looking for a job. The newspaper headlines were, "Poor farmer's son becomes heir to the empire, the victory of love and hard work." When Ahmed's father in the village heard this news, his eyes filled with joy. "Son, today you have made me proud." Ahmed touched his father's feet. "Father, this is all the result of your training. You taught me that the true identity of a person is his honor and morality, not wealth." The father hugged his son to his chest. A few days later, a ceremony was held in the large hall of the factory. Thousands of people gathered. Ahmed and Catherine stood together on the stage. Mr. Haikal held the microphone and said, "Today I announce the happiness of my daughter. This is not just my son-in-law, but my son. Ahmed and Catherine's marriage is the new beginning of my empire. The hall echoed with applause. Catherine held Ahmed's hand in front of everyone and said, looking into his eyes, "You are not just my husband. You are the greatest achievement of my life." Ahmed replied slowly, "And you are the dream for which I have lit a fire in my heart for 12 years. Today that dream is a reality." On the wedding night, moonlight was streaming in through the window. Catherine said softly, "Ahmed, you said that love is not just in words, but in sacrifice. Today, I promise you that I will share every sacrifice with you for the rest of my life." Ahmed held her hand tightly, "And I promise that no matter what time says, I will always give you respect, love and peace." Their shadows merged in the moonlight. Thus, a farmer's son, who once sat on the sidewalk and remembered his spoiled classmate, was now starting a new life with him. Love won, pride lost, and life began to blossom in new colors. Several months had passed. The Hekal Group factory was now standing stronger than ever. The workers' faces were radiant because now they were not only getting paid, but also getting respect and protection. All this was thanks to Ahmed's hard work and justice. The city newspapers still used to present the story of Ahmed and Catherine as an example. This is not just a love story, but a story of the breaking of pride and the triumph of hard work. One day, Ahmed and Catherine came to the village. The smell of soil, the air of the fields, and the village children came running to see them. "Ahmed Bhai has come." Ahmed's father saw them from afar. Tears of joy began to flow in his eyes. "Son, today you have proven that poverty is not a sin, and wealth is not pride. The real wealth is humanity." Catherine stepped forward and touched Ahmed's father's feet. "Father, if it weren't for you, Ahmed wouldn't have been able to do all this today. Forgive me for ever hurting him." The old farmer placed his hand on her head. "Daughter, I have always prayed that Ahmed would find a companion who would understand him. Today my prayer has been fulfilled." At night, Ahmed and Catherine were sitting on the edge of the fields. The stars were twinkling in the sky. The wind was gently rustling the standing crops. Catherine said softly, "Have you ever thought, Ahmed, that day when you were sitting on the sidewalk and I looked at you with contempt? And today, this day," Ahmed looked up at the sky with a faint smile. "Yes, Catherine, I thought, but I prayed that one day we would both see this scene. There were severe trials in the journey of love, but in the end, love won." Catherine rested her head on his shoulder. "This story is not over. Ahmed, this is just the beginning of our new life." The first rays of the sun appeared on the distant horizon, as if nature itself were witnessing their new life. Thus, a farmer's son and an industrialist's daughter set out on a new journey in the light of their love, where the walls of pride were broken and a new world was built on the foundations of humanity.